moment, this session is being recorded and will be posted on the event page where you registered for the program on the AVM website within the next day or two. As you probably noticed, you're muted as you enter the room. You do have the option of unmuting as we go along, and feel free to throw out a question and or use the chat feature, which we're monitoring as we go through. If there will be time for open discussion towards the end of the presentation, but I also find that throwing out a question in the chat box is a great repository to make sure that we get everything covered. If you are having some connectivity problems, I also find that turning off your video, your camera, may help with your connection. It uses a lot of bandwidth, and if you're having audio issues, sometimes that turns out to be the problem. Likewise, if you're having audio issues, you can call in. The information here provided, the phone number and the ID, are also in your registration information that you should have received. I think that's about it. We've got some interesting and fun things lined up here for the next hour or so. But for the time being, I want to turn this over to our board president, Sharon Jordan.
Good morning, AVM members and guests. Thank you so much for joining us for our Coffee Connection. I think that we've got some great conversations that we will have today that will be led by Jessica, who is our co-VP of AVM. And this is going to be talking about us resurfacing from COVID-19. What does that look like? Where are we? So we are really interested in feedback from you guys, interested in what it is that you're doing as well. And I just want to, tell you guys that I am looking forward to the amazing work that you will be doing in light of everything that has been happening within our cities, our states, as well as our country as of late. And AVM will also be looking for opportunities to post resources on our resource page to assist with some social, racial justice information that may help you to navigate with your volunteers as well as with your staff as well. If you do have questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to us. But we're all in this together. We have continued and always done really great work in our own spaces. And I know that collectively we're going to be able to do wonderful things to move this country in the direction and the positive direction that we need to see it in. So thanks a lot, and let's enjoy this morning.
Great, thank you, Sharon. And I do want to say, you might find in the next Coffee and Connection, we will be discussing equity, diversity, and inclusion and how you can better manage that within your volunteer programs. So maybe you can look forward to that. So before we begin, I do want to, if I can get my screen to move forward here. Come on, there we go. We're going to kind of do a round robin, and if everybody would go ahead and unmute yourselves and just throw out your name and your organization, where you work, and your basic title, just so we can kind of get an idea of who is in the room with us. That would be wonderful. And I'm gonna go down the list, and just so we don't have people chiming up, I'm going to go down my list of who's here and just call out some names. And Jessica, why don't we start with you?
My name is Jessica Brandt. I am the volunteer coordinator at Catholic Charities here in Milwaukee, and I also serve as the AVM co-chair.
And Sharon, I think you didn't tell us what your day job is.
Sharon Jordan. I am the Community Relations Director for Direct Supply, and as Bryce indicated, I am also proud to be your AVM President.
And Amy.
I'm Amy Dito. I work at River Edge Nature Center, and I'm the Volunteer and Special Events Manager there.
Thank you. And Kelly?
Hi, I am Kelly Christman. I'm the Volunteer and Training Manager at Discovery World, and I also serve as the PR and Marketing Co-Chair for AVM.
Great. Anna?
Hey everyone, I'm Anna. I'm the volunteer and development coordinator at Cathedral Center. And by the videos, it looks like I might be the only one in the office today. We are back in action downtown here at Cathedral Center. So enjoy your time on your couches while you can.
That's great. We actually do have one or two other people who are just kind of home for the day, but who will be some interesting discussion about what it is like to manage during all of this. What about Ashley?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley. I am a program manager at the American Cancer Society.
And Joanna.
Hi everyone, I'm Joanna. I'm the volunteer and events coordinator at Vision Forward Association, and I also serve as the membership co-chair for AVM.
Great. And what about Kathy Hayen? Did I pronounce that right?
Yes, you did. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see faces again. I am with the Alzheimer's Association, and I am the Memories in the Making coordinator. It's a watercolor painting class that we do with Alzheimer's.
Wonderful. Wonderful. And what about Kathy Weinberg-Kinsey?
Good morning, everyone. I am the volunteer manager for Secure Futures. We do financial education for high school teens.
Great. Welcome. Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. Kelsey Michaels. I am the Community Partnerships Coordinator with UW Credit Union.
Wonderful. And Mandy.
Hi, everybody. Mandy Clark, Direct Supply. I'm the operations manager of the community involvement team. I have the pleasure and honor of working with Sharon.
Wonderful. And I also see we have Rachel Mears and Cheryl Schmitz from Luther Manor. Do either one of you or both of you want to talk a little bit and tell us what you do there? Or not? That's okay if not. Oh, okay. I appreciate I'm glad you're using the chat. We'll definitely talk with you there. So now we're going to do something a little different. I want you all to, if you can, open up a web browser and go to menti.com, menti.com, and just plug in the numbers 881967. Don't worry about spaces. Just kind of stick in those numbers and then answer the question there. Is your organization currently open or closed to the public? And we will start seeing what everybody's doing. Watch all of the numbers trickle as everybody starts providing their information here. If you're having problems using the format, just let me know in the chat. But we'll give you some time. We're going to do a couple of these, so once you've logged in, don't close your browser. And we can see there on the screen that we still have about half of you have logged in. So Amy, so Sharon says that she is closed to the public and using outside space for events. And Amy, are you using the browser? Is your Zoom in browser or on your phone? Just for my own personal knowledge. Amy says that River Edge is open. We'll give it one more moment here. But you can see that the majority of you guys, almost 2/3, are closed. I think there are a couple folks that we have in the chat that one's open, one's closed. So that will kind of keep the numbers the same. So the majority of you are still closed to the public. And whereas we got about a third of you that are still working in the space. So let's go ahead to the next one. Are you, with your, considering where your organization is at, are you working from home? Yeah, are you working from home? Are you working from the office? Or are you dividing your time, spending a couple days in the office, couple days at home? Pretty good cross section there. Most of you are working from home, but otherwise it's pretty split. Some of you are constantly in the office and a couple are kind of running back and forth. And Sharon says she is going back and forth, but more at home. Great, good. That's the majority of you, so we will move on. And let me know how you are currently engaging with your volunteers. And there's no choice. You can simply plug in what you want to say, and you can, if there are different ways, you can enter different answers, multiple answers. But let's kind of get an idea of how business is processing for you guys. And even if you see your own, if you see somebody's answer on the screen or that's the same as yours, go ahead and put your own in anyway. Sharon is engaging with emails and personal calls and newsletters. We can. So you can see a lot of you guys are using virtual connection at this point. Don't have a lot of volunteers in the space yet. Still connecting in order to stay engaged and keep your volunteers together as much as possible. So good, there's a lot of interesting ideas here. I love this kind of celebrating birthdays and graduations and just letting them know that you are still there. Great. So with all of this in mind, we're going to talk about some of these things a little bit more in depth, but I wanted to kind of take a moment to turn things over or to kind of, this is what we are going to be discussing here today. For those of you that have been working that never closed, we're going to talk a little bit about how things have been going and ideally some things that of what you may or may not have learned during the process. And then we'll move on to those of you, since there are a majority of you that are still working your way into face-to-face connecting, how to actually manage that process and support your volunteers while still keeping their safety and sort of health and mental health concerns in check. And then we'll talk about how to, one of the most important parts of volunteer management, how to recognize their activity and their participation virtually. So I'm going to turn this over first of all to Jessica to tell us how Catholic Charities has been managing since they never actually closed their doors.
Thank you, Bryce.
It's all yours.
Thank you. So it's great to see everyone. Thank you again so much for joining us. We're really excited to have you here. So as Bryce mentioned, Catholic Charities hasn't closed during COVID. One of the really unique things is it's our 100-year anniversary. So as many of you came into 2020 thinking it's going to look completely different. You know, you have all these big plans, and that's not the case for many of you. And you've had to adjust and try new things. It looks very different. And it's the same with our organization. We're hoping for big celebrations, really work on, you know, what our stories look like the last 100 years. But instead, we've really had to adapt to those changing needs of our clients during COVID, which, and the same thing is very Catholic Charities. So we've stayed open. We've tried to kind of adapt to those changing needs. So done a lot of things that we normally would not have done. So I think this is a great, as COVID has given us a lot of inconveniences, I think it's given us a lot of opportunities as well to grow and change individually, but also as an organization. So we've added, you know, food services, which we've never done before. I've never worked with delivery volunteers, so that's a whole new ball game for me, as well as virtually. So we've done virtual therapy, virtual sessions with our clients, but also made that transition into virtual with our volunteers. Again, it's something we would probably never have tried otherwise. So it's really a unique opportunity for us. So how we started is most of our volunteer opportunities within our Refugee and Immigration Services program were in person, and it was going out into the community to places that the clients feel comfortable at. So either in their home or at the library or at our offices, to provide tutoring within citizenship, English, or just being, you know, that friendly face to them. So within that program, we really had to figure out how are we going to transition this so that our clients feel supported, especially during this scary time. Right, they're still pretty new to our country, and you know, this for us is scary. It's scary for them as well. So how can we be a supportive person? So we decided to do virtual opportunities with our refugee clients, and then our other in-person volunteer opportunities has stopped for the safety of our clients and for our safety of our volunteers as well. But as I mentioned, we're doing some delivery and other in-person opportunities. So how we've started throughout this process is figuring out how are we going to provide the information to our new volunteers. So on my first day when we decided to do this virtual opportunities, I posted it to Volunteer Match, and as many of you may have seen, as you're posting new opportunities, trying to stay connected to what's going on, there's opportunities to flag your opportunity as like COVID-related high needs. Well, my first day when I did on Volunteer Match, I did on a Friday, and over the weekend, I came back on Monday with 141 emails of people that were interested in volunteering virtually. And what was really interesting about this whole thing is it wasn't just from Wisconsin. I got people from all over the country interested in volunteering virtually and providing tutoring to our refugees just here in Milwaukee. So that really opened a whole new door of volunteers, people with different experiences, figuring out how to manage that amount of volunteers. So then we had to think, okay, we have people from Hawaii to North Carolina to Florida, and how are we going to do these virtual information sessions? So my colleague and I decided to take the jump and do a virtual information session. We had already had PowerPoints scheduled for when we were doing information sessions in person, so we did some tweaks to that and jumped on board with everybody else and did Zoom calls. And what we have found is that it's new and it's different, and you know, there's always those technical issues, but in the long run, it's actually saved us a lot of time and energy, because as we were talking about in our last member meeting, for those of you that attended, we're talking about how many volunteers you start with, and then the end you're down to 40% that actually go through, and after that you're only 10% or so that stay on long term. So if you're thinking about how many volunteers you potentially lose, our volunteer information sessions that were virtual gave the opportunity for people to apply, to attend the session, and then decide what they want to do after. So we would send a follow-up email right after with their follow-up information with the PowerPoint, so they could discern that on their own. So in the long run, it helped us a lot because you get people that are attending, you get people that don't attend, but you're not sitting at your office and doing one-on-one sessions anymore, or as frequently, because you have these virtual sessions scheduled in advance. From there, our platform that we use to manage volunteers, we use Better Impact, has the opportunity for you to do e-learning modules on it. So I'm not sure about other volunteer platforms, but we were able to use that and take our PowerPoints that we would do for in-person training and putting them up on the e-learning module for our volunteers to go in and, you know, see a pre-training. So give them that information that they need to get started. And then we would then schedule an in-person Zoom call with the volunteer supervisor to provide that more information. And usually at that point, you either get the people that are still continuing or the ones that are like, this isn't quite ready for me. So it gives that opportunity as well as a time saver. And then we did, again, the virtual trainings using the same materials that we used initially. And then I would use the end as our volunteer policies. So also do another online module. And what I found was really cool about it is that with our system, you can actually track it. So those were some of the things that we've moved to that has really been helpful as volunteer managers, but then also to our volunteers as well, and make it more accessible to our volunteers. And then we also started our volunteer meetups. I'm sure as many of you can relate to back pre-COVID, trying to get all your volunteers together in one room for any type of recognition or just a meetup information session. We will be talking a little bit about just volunteer advisory boards. I think that's in our next member meeting. And how to get all of those people together in one room in person was just always a struggle for me, and I'm sure for many of you as well. So we started doing virtual meetups, so using Zoom, sending out the invite to all of our volunteers, and we've actually been getting a really good turnout from 10 plus volunteers within our Refugee Immigration Services tutoring program, mostly focused on our English and our citizenship. And it's great because just like this, you come with questions, we have a topic or some education to share. And then we send those slides to our volunteers that aren't able to attend. So we're really able to keep engaged with our volunteers that way. I've also, in addition to that, been sending out or trying to send out weekly or bi-weekly check-ins, just letting people know what's going on. We've also done a blood drive and food drives and just trying to get our volunteers engaged in that as well, whether they're able to volunteer right now or not, or just knowing that we're still thinking about them. So yeah, those are kind of some of the main things that I've been doing and just trying to stay engaging with our new volunteers as well. I thought one of the really cool things for me, again, I've never done volunteers that were doing deliveries or pickups or working directly with clients in that side. They said it was just, the process was so much easier and it had a better flow and it made it easy for them to just agree to volunteer. Even though a lot of my times it was, you know, a couple days before saying, hey, I need you to take this to this parish. They were always willing to help. And I don't know that we would ever have that same response had we not gone virtual. So I think as you guys are thinking about coming back, today I'm working from home, but I've been in my office this whole time. Now thinking about how you want to ease into maybe virtual sessions, seeing how you can take your current training materials and bringing them online. Because again, we're trying to social distance, we're trying to keep everybody safe. So however we can do that by having less in-person connection, the better. One of the other things that we did as we were talking about volunteers that were doing deliveries is how to make sure they're safe with COVID and taking those CDC recommendations and putting it in a training as well. So that was another thing I did. I put together a PowerPoint. If any of you want that, I'd be happy to share that with you as well. And that covered, you know, how to put on a mask the right way, when you should take off your mask and put on your gloves, just reminding them about social distancing and, you know, those safety precautions and trying to keep the information real and right for them. Because, you know, there's so much different stuff going around, making sure it's right for our volunteers, but also for our agency as well. And then one of the things I wanted to share with you, and I'll put the link in the box, is Volunteer Pro Net, one of the resources out there for volunteer coordinators, I highly recommend you check it out. I tell everybody about it. She has some great free stuff as well as a membership only portal, but all of the free stuff really allows you to see a bunch of different approaches. She has live chats, but she also has a free session coming up about coming back to work. So I know we're posting on social media. I'll post the link in there as well. Amy Tito mentioned to talk about volunteer forms and having COVID on there, as well as sharing your policies on the website, which I think that's a great opportunity. And what I want to know from you guys is, for those of you that are working directly with clients and volunteers have to come to your site. So as you're talking about reopening, what are you doing, or what is your approach? What is your plans for bringing volunteers back to in-person? So we have our adult day center. We haven't made it that far yet. And I'm like, I don't want a lot of volunteers coming in, especially service learners that have been on campus. So what are your anticipations for bringing volunteers back to clients? So feel free to jump in. Let me know if you have any questions.
So I do think we're going to go over some of what Jessica has talked about in a little more detail and give you actual some tools to kind of take with you. Again, the presentation as well as the slide deck and a number of resources will be made available to you after the fact. So if you want to provide, throw into the chat box kind of what you're doing now and let Jessica know kind of how you're approaching re-engaging. We're going to continue on and start talking a little bit more about things to consider as you reopen, and trying to gauge whether or not you're ready, whether you've checked all the boxes, and to help make that process a little easier. So first of all, as you've been in kind of lockdown mode, what's changed in terms of volunteer recruitment and your program needs? Have you lost programs? Have you added programs to that need to have new or different requirements? And yet what core services are still there? So as you think about what has changed, do you have the capacity to add new volunteers or not? Or are you really just about gauging, utilizing your existing volunteers moving forward? And as Jessica mentioned, do you have a way to engage social distancing in the process? If that's all the case, then how do you get that information out to your volunteers? Transparency is vital, and make sure that you get as much detail out to them as possible. If they're going to be coming in with health concerns, you want to make sure to be able to address that. Let them know virtually, and keep them updated with everything that changes. A lot of this holds true for how you've hopefully been managing while in lockdown, but it becomes that much more vital as you start to reopen and re-engage them more in a face-to-face manner. So this is just kind of email 101, but I did want to point out that there's some very specific things that you want to make sure to address in your email. Specifically, how is your organization managing all of this? Let them know what they're walking into, how you've been managing it in the past 3 months, and what are your plans moving forward, and most specifically, how does it affect them directly? And you can also, I think it's always a good idea to provide additional resources so they can do their own homework and develop their own sense of security in all of it. So how do you approach social distancing and volunteerism? Again, some of you have been doing this already, but just to make sure and kind of drive home some of these things, we're not going to go over them in too much detail. Jessica has done a great job of kind of stating what Catholic Charities has already been doing. A lot of these still hold true. I would say one of the things that really jumps out to me is how to engage them in a more of a face-to-face manner. We can always talk about virtual opportunities, but as they're coming out of the dark, are there things that they can do within their own comfort zone? Can they do projects from home? Can you bring in 1 or 2 or 3 people and manage them in shifts while still maintaining social distancing? What about inviting teams of people that perhaps have been sheltering in place together already, families or small groups of friends that may have that already have that comfort zone with them. So again, some basic shelter in place sort of, different health and safety concerns. You'll have all this information to read. Once we're done here, I want to make sure to be able to open this up. But at this point, I do want to talk a little bit about how we get to the recognition aspect before we start opening up the whole conversation to everybody, just so we have a whole variety of topics to talk about. And so I'm going to go ahead.
I personally, just looking at the chat, I would love for us to just open up the lines so that people can talk. I mean, we just provided you guys with a lot of resources, and that's what we're here to do. But I am also interested in hearing some of your experiences. If you guys do have concerns, that maybe there are other people that are on the line that can address those as well. I know that that may be a little bit wonky, and I know that that's going to be a little more work for you, Bryce, because people may kind of overtalk each other. But if we can just make a promise to share the air and maybe just talk about some of those slides that were provided, maybe go back and discuss maybe even 5 minutes on each of those slides, that would be great.
Sure, no problem at all. So we'll go back here and kind of talk through together. Here, if you all want to unmute, go right ahead, and let's have a conversation. So as you guys are managing with moving from lockdown mode into a more community engaged program, what kinds of things are you guys doing? Any?
So with us and our organization, we work directly with our volunteers, our employees. And so we are looking at ways to send our employees back out to engage with the nonprofit organizations. Now it's a matter of finding out what protocols do you have in place to ensure that our families and our employees are going to be safe. So I guess a question for me is if any of you guys can talk about what protocols you have in place and how you are advertising that. Is that information on your websites? Because it's my responsibility to ensure that I'm sending our volunteers out into a safe environment.
Looks like Amy raised her hand. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, we're kind of in a different situation because we're, just inundated with people that want to volunteer for us because we're outdoors. And so what we did create is the admin department created an reopening plan that really spells out step by step how everything is happening. And we are sharing that with our volunteers so they understand all the steps that we've taken from beginning to end to create more protection for staff and volunteers. And then I created a volunteer waiver. And it's not, it's not a waiver that says, if you get COVID, you can't sue us. But it's more just, here is the protocol. You need to stay home if you're sick. You need to wear a mask. You need to social distance. And then we're having them sign that so that then we know that they have, gotten that information and they feel comfortable with it. The hardest part for me is transitioning to all electronic documents for people to sign, because when I started, nothing was digital at all. And so now I have my forms. I need, some direction on how to create all those forms so that I can do a completely digital sign on for new orientations. Even if they come out, I still would rather not have them touch, paper and sign it and be shuffling things like that around. I think it would be safer to have it all digital.
That's great. That's great. Anybody else have other thoughts, or are you doing something similar, different? Feel free to chime in.
I can speak about what we're doing here at Cathedral Center. Obviously, the group living environment of emergency shelter is unique just in that our staff is super focused on keeping our building safe and preventing any type of outbreak that could happen among our living environment. So with that in mind, we're being very stringent about bringing anyone in the building. So with volunteers, normally we would rely on groups of 10 people to bring in our dinner every night, serve that, our front desk and other just aides around the building is our normal operations. So we're working towards trying to bring in 1 to 2 people that would recur and not be a bunch of different people that would change every week, but the same, so that there's less new introduction of people, but we're still engaging some just to help us around the building during the day. But with that comes the waiver, which I really appreciate hearing about. And also we're just having an internal reflection right now on what is appropriate to ask of a volunteer. Is it appropriate to ask a volunteer to take client temperatures? Is it appropriate to ask a volunteer to, wear gloves? And normally our volunteers help with our bag checks. It's a security measure when our guests come in the building, we check bags. With COVID, is that okay? Are we putting them at a greater risk? So, in the course of today, I would love to, if anyone has thoughts or recommendations on those pieces, I'd love to know. Otherwise, what we're doing is very similar to what I'm hearing in terms of laying out what our protocols will be with that kind of group living experience in mind. But we don't want our 1,500 volunteers annually to go without any engagement for the rest of the year. So there's the other piece of, I would love to know some insight of how, I'm already gaining some from this call, but just creative ways to keep people engaged, even if they won't be able to come in the building.
I think that's great, Anna. With a lot of things you said, I really love what you said in the chat about keeping your regular volunteers coming back so you have the same people. That was a huge concern with our adult day that has moved into our food pantry, having delivery volunteers coming in, and we still had to have people coming in, but keeping them the same people. And even within our office, we feel comfortable because we have the same people coming in. So I think that's a really great approach. And I haven't found with any of our volunteers that asking them to wear a mask or gloves has been something they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. More like, I'm going to wear a mask. I had an intern start this past week and came in wearing a mask. She was like the only one in the office wearing a mask, but she was completely comfortable with that and, had those sanitizing wipes available. I think that's going to be the hardest thing as we come back is having those materials available. A lot of people have their masks already. But then like having, the gloves and sanitizing wipes, I think those are really hard to get a hold of. So one way maybe you could engage those other volunteers is talking about making those homemade masks. So if you have big groups, putting those together or having a drive for other materials that you need. So thinking of some, even if you have like not like pro bono, but like skilled volunteers, seeing how they could help you maybe transition some of this stuff online or using other things that you might need and engaging that way.
Great. Any other thoughts or practices that you guys are kind of looking at or considering as you try to figure all of this out?
One of the questions that I put in the chat was, what do you guys feel that you need to be confident in returning to work or bringing volunteers back. So if there's anything that we can provide or reach out to as a community, I know the biggest thing so far has been like, what do your waivers look like? And kind of transitioning to electronics. So I made a note of that to see, you know, how we can help support you in that way. But if there's anything else you feel you need, what questions you want to leave here with answers, or that we can, you know, circle back and have answers to, please let us know. Because I know a lot of the things that are out there right now is giving you suggestions, but maybe not having that end answer. And that's something we want to be able to provide to you, is that end answer, and working together as a community, as a group of colleagues, to come together and, you know, figure out how we can move forward together. And I think that was one of the things that had come up when we're back in person as COVID was starting, is we're in this together. Why don't we share resources and build from there, especially within, you know, Milwaukee.
This is Kathy with the Alzheimer's Association. I have to say that we are extremely fortunate that, one, we were able to flip our programs from face-to-face to virtual in like 3 days. And our volunteers have really stepped up and been super amazing. And they're kind of pushing us and chomping at the bit for us to get more virtual programs out there, since our constituent base, a lot of the home healthcare agencies are not doing in persons. So our participation with caregivers and those living with Alzheimer's has really increased, which is, it's a double-edged sword. It's a good thing, but we're glad that we're out there to support people going through these stupid COVID times right now. But yeah, I like I said, we're just really super glad that our volunteers are chomping at the bit and want more programs.
Kathy, can you talk a little bit about how you've made that transition, mostly with, with getting your clients to go virtual? I'm sure it's a little bit easier with their volunteers, but how did you make those connections between your clients and your volunteers?
We had our volunteers actually reach out to caregivers and make phone calls and tell them, you used to attend this program, it's now virtual. And we've made them hybrid programs, so you can either join by Zoom or you can join just by talking on the phone. And some of our other programs that we hold, because we're in rural areas all over the state of Wisconsin, we've actually been mailing information to people. So they still have some sort of engagement and interaction with the Alzheimer's Association, and they're still feeling supported.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, I'm using Zoom. Kathy wrote in the chat to train volunteers. I'm currently using Zoom as our platform. If anyone else is, feel free to chime in as well.
I guess what I'm asking though is, are you finding yourself needing to train the volunteer to be able to use Zoom? Yeah.
So far, personally, I've had very little need to train our volunteers on Zoom. We've had a couple that were maybe not as familiar with it. So we did like a phone call initially. I think my favorite one is one of our volunteers was on a Zoom call and they had their camera flipped. So we saw their lovely plants instead of her. So my colleague ended up calling her and like, okay, this is where you need to go and press that. It was super simple. But I think just having that link for anyone who has an email, being able to click that, and then having that password, it's pretty simple, I think, for most people to engage in that. As we brought on clients, so as I mentioned, we were doing our refugee program. As we brought on clients, we just tried to meet them where they're at as far as their training. So if some are comfortable using Zoom, they have their kids already using Zoom, we've done that, but otherwise tried to use FaceTime or WhatsApp whatever they're comfortable with to try and meet them where they're at. And that could be the same thing that we could bring into place with your volunteers, is trying to meet them where they're at and seeing how you can integrate different platforms into one area.
We also have some tricks of the trades and things to do when you're on Zoom calls and meetings. And I'll make sure that that is something that we will also add to our AVM resources for you guys. So you should see that within the next few days, if not by early next week, once Bryce posts this video as well.
Rachel had a question. Does anybody plan to do health screens of their volunteers, like taking their temperature, asking if they have COVID symptoms before attending a volunteer shift? That's something that I think if you're putting into place with your organization as with visitors or staff coming in, I think that's appropriate. Has anyone else have a plan to do that?
At Discovery World, we'll be putting quite a few of those in place, both with staff and volunteers. We'll have the same expectations for both. So we will be asking staff and volunteers to do like an at-home screening, taking their temperature and going through a set of questions. We're going to be using the app Healthy Together, and it's free, really nice. It takes you through all of kind of the self-screening questions, and lets you know if you should see a healthcare provider or if you're kind of good to go. And it's a daily check. It gives you nice little notifications. It lets you send it via email or text to anyone that you'd like, so they can just share that with a supervisor or volunteer manager really easily. But then we're also going to have kind of resources like a listing of those self-check questions and kind of forehead scan thermometers at the building as well, if people need to do that check at the building, if they don't have their own thermometer or anything like that. And we'll have kind of a set space right inside the front entrance to do that. So if anyone does have a higher temp or something, they can turn around and head on home or to a healthcare provider as well. And that's, of course, in addition to all the PPE stuff we've talked about as well.
We have the same thing in place at Direct Supply. We have not started welcoming visitors onto our campus inside as of yet, but our security people will also have those digital thermometers. So when before people can even get through our gates, they will be gauging their temperatures. And if it's not sufficient, then they are going to be turning people around. But we've got all those protocols that are in place, as you're saying, Kelly. And I think it's going to be really important that we make sure that we're posting those things as well. So people that are going to be, coming back to our organizations are aware of what those expectations are.
So I've put on the screen a list of resources that will be available in the slide deck. These are all links to different documents. There are local, statewide, national level, and international resources there. Specifically, there are some documents there that put out by FEMA regarding how to manage and deploy volunteers in a pandemic. And to make sure that, and some of the things that you guys have been talking about are already in some of this information, so you'll have that available to you, as well as some of the kind of basic information provided about what's going on nationally as well, in terms of how the pandemic is how recovery is developing or not. In terms of how we are all sort of working within your organization, what kind of feedback or guidance are you getting from your supervisors, or from your executive director? Are you kind of being left to figure it out on your own, or are you getting more information from higher up? Anybody? It's okay if you're not and you want to complain about that. That's okay too.
We have an action team put together, mostly talking about our food drive and the other initiatives and what that looks like moving forward. Because again, there are new different things that we've been doing and where we're going. So that's kind of been my initial guidance on when I need to, try and figure out a different way to engage those volunteers, as that won't be something we'll be continuing. So that's been my main guidance. So that comes from all our program leaders, and I think we're really fortunate to have that and have that great connection with all of our leaders.
Great. And Kathy mentions that the Alzheimer's Association does have a COVID task force. And so are they, let me ask you, Kathy, are they providing you guidance related to all of this, specifically to engaging volunteers? Or are they kind of leaving it to you to filter through on your own?
We actually have bi-weekly town hall meetings. So they basically said, again, because of our constituent base, nursing homes, long-term care, et cetera, will not be theoretically probably not till the end of the year when they get to phase 3. And we basically have said, you are not allowed to have any face-to-face one-on-ones, just because if somebody's asymptomatic and you meet with a caregiver and that caregiver goes to see their loved one, we can't take the risk of it. So we basically feel that we're going to be working from home at least through the end of the year, which is fine.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of organizations that are kind of in that same boat, just kind of playing it safe. And in spite of some of the reopening guidance that we're getting, that a lot of organizations are just kind of playing it close to the vest right now. What about the rest of you? I know one person.
We have a CERT team at Direct Supply as well, and what they're responsible for is campus, right? So when people come on, I mean, we have arrows that are on the floor. This is the direction that people should be walking in. Here are hand sanitizing stations, all of the signage if you're not feeling well. So all of those things are in place right now. When it comes to the volunteers, they have left that to our discretion as a community involvement team. And so in March, we made the decision to, of course, halt all volunteer engagement opportunities for our partners until we can kind of wrap our heads around what that meant. We then started finding virtual volunteer opportunities, and also realized that it would be safer to send family members versus teams to go out for team building opportunities, because if you're sending families, they're all in the same space. Usually a lot of the organizations are only allowing about 6 to 10 people in that space during volunteering anyway. So that we found might be a great way for us to look. Now, as of June 20th, is going to be our coming out of COVID-19 volunteer day. So we have 4 volunteer engagement activities that will be happening on June 20th that we will be advertising to our employees. So one is going to be a family walk, and that's going to be for our longest day for the Alzheimer's Association. So getting your family out, walk, post those pictures, let us see, using the hashtag for Alzheimer's Association, all of those, and trying to promote the upcoming walk as well. Another one is going to be a graduation ceremony that we're going to have on our parking lot space for Boys and Girls Club College Access. So for the kids who have now graduated from college, we're going to have that outside in an outside space. The other is going to be a Hike for Hope, which is going to be another volunteer engagement opportunity for, and Mandy, you can chime in, I forgot the name of the organization, Hope Street, I believe, Hope Street Ministry. And then another is going to be for the Humane Society. So looking at opportunities for families, for team building, for pets, as well as for the general. So that's what we're going to do, and with hopes that people will then feel comfortable, getting out of their spaces. We're going to ensure also that we provide masks as well as gloves for all of our volunteers. So that's how we're going to start. And then I'm just going to slowly start evaluating based on the protocols and procedures that our community partners are telling me they have in place to make a determination if we're going to send volunteers out. It's going to be a slow slow process, but I figured June 20th will be like that we're coming out day, right? We have to continue to do this. We have to continue to support our communities and utilize those skills and resources that we have to improve our situations throughout the city as well as the world.
Yeah, you said it, Sharon. And I think the thing that's it just kind of organically happened, but it couldn't be more magical and important given everything that's going on right now in the world and specifically our country. The Hike for Hope, it does benefit the Hope House, and that is an organization that's doing a lot to serve in the social justice area in the 53206 zip code. So that's going to be a really great opportunity for our partner employees to get involved and try to affect some change. Right now, I feel like a lot of people feel like they want to do something and they don't know how to help. And then just that mix of all the different types of organizations that are being supported on that day, you can pick and choose what's important to you, or what makes most sense. I think it's going to be a really great mix of things for sure.
That's great, and I think that's a fantastic note to end on as we are at time. Unless there are other thoughts or other concerns or questions that somebody wants to throw out. Otherwise, I'm gonna kind of wrap things up here and let you all get about your way. Just again to let you know, the recording as well as the slide deck as well as the chat will be saved and posted to the event page, and we will send out an email to everybody that signed up so you'll know when it's all ready for you to review. It should be by the weekend, so look for that. Thank you all very much for joining us, and like was mentioned earlier, if you do have questions or follow-up, feel free to contact us. Even if it's just to the info@ email address, please reach out. We're here to help you and do the best within our ability. So unless there's anything else, everybody have a wonderful day and try enjoy some of the nice weather before it gets too warm. So
great job, Jessica.
Great to see you guys again. Thank you so much for coming. We love having you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.